was just saying, speaking with my companion here, that I was really glad to be asked to come along to kind of reconnect with what's happening here in London, and I know others from further afield. I live in Devon, and it's kind of interesting hearing oneself be introduced, I have to say. When one writes that, one expects people to read it and not be necessarily. Is that where this is? I've got a lot of notes in here, I may refer to them, but my feeling in the space right now is maybe just to sleep a little, and that may mean I don't say all the things I could say, but it's possibly more likely to take just 15 minutes then. And I'm just, first of all, kind of in naming that sense, how can we respond to the crisis, to the circumstance of our time? There's a way in which I think it's really important to hold that yes, this is a crisis, it's a time of critical concern, of need for critical action and response. And also, at the same time as that, the Buddha's teaching to me gives us a sense that actually this is also just the nature of human existence, is that we face such crises in different ways and times, and maybe we've been fortunate in recent times for that to be less prominent on the social and political level. But ecologically and in terms of climate, we can see a real acceleration. But the sort of the contemplation that first comes to mind for me from the Buddha's teachings that's relevant to this is the contemplation of mortality. The recognition that we, of course, we know are not here forever, but also the recognition that our communities, our social structures, our species, and our very world is not forever. And that isn't to say we go, oh, so that's all right then. It's much more the sense of making peace with the fact that this is natural process. And of course we want to do what we can to enhance and amplify the well-being of ourselves, our world, our life, our communities. And that the Buddha's teachings offer some really important reflections with regard to that, and very important insights and understandings. And at three levels, I'll just maybe mention initially, one can look at it. One is the orientation in terms of how do we understand this to be what it is, a crisis, and how it comes to be. How do we relate to it? How to orient ourselves in response to this? Or in a way you could say our heart response. How do I engage with this? And then also, what is our active external expression of response to it? And so three different pieces there. In terms of this, I just wanted to say, and what came to mind, given the context of this conversation, how incredibly grateful I was when I first started to get engaged in more direct action in the sort of 7 or 8 years ago now. I was very touched and inspired to be doing it with such good people as Joe here and sorry, your name already? Haiku, and others who already reminding me of, oh yes, how powerful that was. I come from an insight meditation tradition. It's not really a tradition, it's only been 50 years in a sense, but it's like a primary orientation towards practice in terms of training the heart and the mind. And I think in the situation of being mortal as a human, and the Buddha said, this is the crisis of all of us always. We are mortal, we're not here forever. And therefore train your heart, train your mind, because that will serve your well-being and the well-being of others, and in fact the world. And that training, the training to be able to orient one's attention and choose where and how to place it, is critical, it seems to me, in a world in which our attention is being coerced by forces of commercial, extractivist, industrial sort of complex, and the political world too, basically is pulling our attention in ways that mean we don't attend to what's actually important. You know, entertainment, distraction, enjoyment, all of which have a place, but if it becomes predominant, that's where my attention is, we don't respond appropriately to the circumstance. So in terms of a primary gift, it's simply the tools and the techniques to train our attention, to be able to say, and this is a lot of what insight meditation is founded in, I can cultivate, as we were doing just before, to place my attention here train it to stay here, to choose, shall I give it here, shall I not? Not absolute choice, because we're not totally in control, but we have a profound influence. That is an essential, I think, training to live well and to respond well in the world we find ourselves. And a second training, which is the training of the heart, is the way I'm going to describe it, to stay open, to stay soft, to stay responsive and flexible in the face of what might be hostility, what might be threat, what might be approaching or actual danger. And part of the sense, I think, at the moment of crisis is that it's not approaching, it's here, if one looks and sees. And of course, for some and many in different communities and different locations than maybe one's own, and our own, that I have had a lot of privilege in my life, and so that's been able to be kept more distant, but for many that has always been the case, and yet now it's more obvious and apparent, I think, to more of us, that danger is here, and danger in terms of the well-being of you don't need me to say this, I'm sure you know, but just naming it, the danger to the ecology, to the climate, the very, in a way, basis for sustaining life as we know it. Other forms of life will continue, but life as we know it. And on the way towards that, the potential for and the very real risk of the breakdown of our social structure, of our ability to live as human beings in a society oriented towards wholesome values. That these are things we cannot take for granted anymore. And this is scary, this is worrying, this is concerning. The Buddha's teachings point us, and this is for me critical, to understanding that this arises from a blindness, a lack of comprehension, of understanding. Avidya is the word the Buddha used in my understanding, of not understanding the way things are, the way things arise. And born of that, the greed and the hatred that we see playing out in the world, that inner practice is intended to address in ourselves, but the outer practice, and this is what I would say simply is activism, is translating that into the social field, into the collective of, we could call societal or human collective consciousness. Not trying to posit some particular thing there, but nonetheless that's how it works. And in that responding to that, seeing, okay, what's possible here, what's needed, the fear that we might experience easily leads to shutting us down, or getting angry and wanting to attack others, and those either who are doing the harm or who are found to address or to stop the harm in the way, or who are trying to address the harm but doing it in a way that's different than we're doing. And that's a really critical one. It's like we agree there's a problem, but we don't like the people who think there's a different solution than my solution or a different response. All of those places, in order to really effectively respond, I think keeping our hearts open is critical. And the trainings of heart opening that Buddhist practice in terms of cultivating loving kindness, compassion, and here equanimity and also joy are essential features. Please come in if there's someone joining us here. Sorry, I'm just pausing. Yeah. Maybe that was obvious. Yeah. I also have no idea how long.
Not that long.
No? Okay. Okay, so having some sense of, actually, I do not wish to judge or blame or attack others, but equally and importantly, oneself for one's own limitation, one's own failure. Effective activism depends on being able to forgive oneself for one's limitations and to not coerce oneself through blame or guilt. And again, working with the heart, working with forgiveness, cultivating qualities of friendliness towards oneself and others, I think are an essential foundation for this. The first time I was in a significant action with Extinction Rebellion in 2018, and the taking of the 5 Bridges action, some of you will remember. I can remember just as I sat here, how much love I felt, being both with other people, but also even for the people who were coming, and in this case coming to arrest us, because they were helping us bring light to the situation. And what was really striking me is the first words that the arresting officer said to me was, "You have a lovely smile." I didn't know I was even smiling, but I could feel that I was like, okay, here we are, this is my role. I'm doing this, they're doing that. This is actually what's needed here. And so it was one of those small things where I said, oh, that practice made a difference there. It brought something into this where we weren't oppositional, although looking at it, here's someone arresting me. That looks oppositional, but it wasn't for either of us. And that for me was really powerful, speaking to something that's possible. Another thing, just again, give example, in terms of the training of heart and mind that I spoke about, because I realised I'm not going to cover all the things I could have. Training oneself to be with discomfort in meditation, which we learn not to sit, not to move every time. It's so helpful at times when we might need to face something that's uncomfortable and keep our heart open. I remember all the times when I might have sat and thought, I won't scratch the itch on my nose, and then there was a time where I remember being locked on to my 2 companions, blockading me. I can't remember what it was exactly. And my nose was really itchy. I was thinking, I'm really glad I practiced with this, because I could relax. And it's not, that wasn't anything great. It was a pretty minor inconvenience compared to what many people have had to face in such situations. But it was just like, oh, okay, yeah, that training, I can relax, I can soften, I can open here. And so with that sense of what is to see that in fact the problem is ultimately not individuals, but the forces that are moving through them. And that if I want to respond to them, I want to do so as clear as possible in myself that I'm not also enacting those forces of hatred, of dismissing others, and the particular blindness of othering, of separating, of saying at a certain level I care, and beyond that I no longer care. To those who are the problem, or those... Anyway, yeah. There's whole paragraphs in some of those sentences, but I'm just holding back. And in a sense, I imagine I'm not telling you too much that's new. What I also wanted to say was, in this, in terms of something that I think the Buddhist teachings point to really clearly, that understanding of equanimity, both in terms of to be at peace in the midst of difficult conditions, understanding it's not because we did something wrong, it's the nature of things. Human beings experience such things, societies experience such things, worlds experience such things. And what's important is, how do I respond? What's possible here? Can I respond? And I would say with that, to understand that our responses, and this is, the Buddhist teaching in terms of one of the key elements of wise understanding, or true understanding, is right understanding. There is a cause and there is a result of action. But key, there is a result of action. You can that's all right. It wasn't painful at all. I've just finished that sentence. Was that 15 minutes or was it longer?
50. You've got another one.
I've just finished it. I'm not supposed to say, but they seem to be allowed to run over. Should be setting a good precedent. With understanding there is a result of action. We don't always see the fruit of what we cultivate inwardly immediately. It's only later sometimes we see, working on that reactivity or cultivating that steadiness of mind. It shows its fruit later. So too, when we engage in action, we don't always see its fruit. It might not be even in our lifetime. But I see it as absolutely clear and, again, foundational in what the Buddha was pointing out, that when we act in alignment with ours, which is wholesome, with compassion, with generosity, with patience, with care for the well-being of others, this makes a difference. It does make a difference. And though we may not see it, we can trust that. And I think that's really important in staying heartened in our engagement when it can sometimes seem that the weight of what's happening is moving in a different direction. But even that it moves less slowly because of our action, or that we plant within the soil of the world, of the human heart, seeds of something beautiful, of something precious, that may flower at some other time. I think it's always worth that we engage in whatever our hearts are moved to engage, to offer. And I'll stop there.
Oh.